I know it's been a while, but try and control yourself. I need some rest.
What if I told you that one of the most beloved comedy shows in television history aired a moment so controversial that it still divides audiences decades later? A show that made millions laugh suddenly made them uncomfortable, and when it happened, everything changed. This wasn't just another joke or a harmless scene. It was a moment that pushed television to its limits and forced viewers to confront something they weren't ready to face. But the real story behind it is even more shocking than anyone expected. Today, The Golden Girls is remembered as a timeless classic, a show filled with humor, warmth, and unforgettable characters, but recently, it found itself back in the spotlight for a very different reason. An episode quietly disappeared from streaming platforms, leaving fans confused and divided. Some demanded answers, others didn't even know what had happened. Why would a beloved show suddenly be removed? What scene could be so powerful that it still sparks debate years later? But things were not always like this. Because when the Golden Girls first appeared in the mid-1980s, it was already breaking rules that television had carefully protected for years. At that time, TV followed a simple formula: young faces, predictable stories, and safe humor. Nothing too bold, nothing too risky. But then came for women who changed everything: Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, and Sophia. They were older, outspoken, and unapologetically themselves. In an industry that often pushed women aside after a certain age, they became the center of attention, and audiences couldn't get enough of them. Not just because they were funny, but because they were real. Each character brought something unique: Dorothy's sharp sarcasm, Rose's innocent but bizarre stories, Blanche's confidence and bold personality, Sophia's fearless and often shocking honesty. Together, they created something television had never seen before. But the real magic wasn't just in the laughter, it was in what they talked about: loneliness, aging, relationships, health, and family struggles. Topics that most shows avoided completely. Week after week, they challenged expectations and pushed boundaries. Viewers tuned in for the jokes, but they stayed for the honesty, the feeling that these women were living life on their own terms. And then something happened that changed everything. The writers decided to take a risk bigger than anything they had done before. It started like a normal storyline. Dorothy's son arrives with news: he's getting married. At first, it seems simple, but then the details begin to unfold. His fiancée is older than him, she's pregnant, and she's black. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. What should have been a happy announcement becomes something much heavier. To families from completely different backgrounds, sitting in one room trying to act like everything is fine. The tension is immediate. You can feel it in every line, every glance, every pause. The jokes are still there, but they carry a different weight now. Because underneath the humor is something real, something uncomfortable. The Golden Girls had tackled serious issues before, but this felt different. This felt raw, the kind of situation people didn't talk about openly. And then came the moment that no one expected. Blanche and Rose walk into the room wearing mud masks, completely unaware of how they appear. For them, it's just another casual moment, but for someone else in the room, it looks entirely different. For a brief second, everything stops. The laughter disappears, the room goes silent. It's not just a misunderstanding. It's a moment loaded with history, perception, and emotion. The scene moves on quickly. The misunderstanding is clarified, but something has already changed. The audience feels it, that uneasy feeling that lingers even after the joke ends. And that's where the show crosses a line it had never crossed before. Not because it intended to offend, but because it refused to avoid the discomfort. And the real story is even more shocking because instead of stepping back, the show leaned further into that tension. The conversation becomes more direct, more awkward. Questions are asked that people usually keep to themselves. Comments are made that feel too real. The humor is still there, but it's different now. It doesn't just make you laugh, it makes you think. It forces you to confront ideas you might not want to face. And for many viewers, that was too much. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some people praised the show for its honesty. They saw it as brave, as something television needed. Others were uncomfortable. They felt the show had gone too far, that it crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. Phones started ringing. Letters poured in. Critics debated. Fans argued. For the first time, The Golden Girls wasn't just entertainment. It was controversy, and behind the scenes, things were just as complicated. The cast had their own opinions about the material. Some lines were questioned. Some jokes were debated. There were moments of disagreement about how far the show should go, but despite everything, they continued because they believed in what they were doing. They believed that comedy could do more than just entertain. It could challenge people. Years passed. The show ended, but that one episode never disappeared. It stayed in conversations, in debates, in memories, and then, decades later, it found itself at the center of attention again. In 2020, the episode was quietly removed from streaming. No big announcement, no clear explanation, just gone. And that silence created a new wave of discussion. Why now? Why remove something that had been part of television history for so long? Was it about sensitivity? Was it about changing standards? Or was it something deeper? People were divided again. Some supported the decision. They believed the content was outdated, that it didn't belong in modern platforms. Others disagreed completely. They argued that removing it erased an important conversation, that it was part of history and history shouldn't be hidden. And then, just as quietly, the episode returned. But the debate didn't end. In fact, it grew stronger because now it wasn't just about one scene. It was about how we view the past, how we interpret it, and what we choose to keep or remove. The truth is complicated. The Golden Girls was never just a comedy. It was a reflection of its time. It showed the world as it was, not as people wished it to be. Sometimes it handled topics perfectly, sometimes it didn't, but it never avoided them. And maybe that's why it still matters, because it reminds us that progress isn't always clean. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it creates tension, but it moves the conversation forward. That one moment, that one scene, changed everything. It showed that comedy could go deeper than laughter, that it could expose truths, challenge beliefs, and make people uncomfortable in ways they didn't expect. And even now, years later, it still has that power. People still watch it and react. They still debate, they still question, and maybe that's the real impact. Not the controversy itself, but the fact that it continues to make people think. Because in the end, The Golden Girls did something very few shows ever managed to do. It stayed relevant, not just because it was funny, but because it was fearless. It took risks, it pushed boundaries, and it accepted the consequences that came with that. Some moments aged well, others didn't, but all of them meant something. And now, looking back at that moment, it leaves us with one question. Should scenes like this be removed to protect modern audiences? Or should they remain as reminders of how far we've come? Because sometimes the most uncomfortable moments are the ones that teach us the most.